Hi, everybody. It's Life and Vibe. Happy Friday night, TGIF. I hope everybody is doing great today. Let me try to make sure I can get this chat going up here. Yeah, I don't want that. So I opened up a poll for everybody this evening. There is a subscriber choice tonight. So if you are subscribed to the channel, then you'll get an opportunity. Yeah, thank you, Angel Glass. Come on in. I'm glad you made it too. Nice to see you this evening. Yeah, I released it kind of early, I guess this morning, but not really. I didn't make an actual stream, like you know, and then I ended up, I work and I ended up coming home. But yeah, thank you for making it. I appreciate you moderating this evening. Always nice to see you. All right, guys. So I did open up a live poll this evening. I thought we would just get into it and choose one of the wonderfully revealing. I mean, I'm surprised he is. There's always going to be a question as to whether he's truthful or not. Okay, so far I have 15 votes, which isn't very many. But 93% are starting to lean between the story of how I married at 16, and then he has his other one, the salesman was born, and then he's talking about the time he supposedly went off with a car as a car salesperson. So uh so yeah, that's what we kind of got this evening. Now I did want to talk a little bit before, because I'm obviously going to let people come in and take a moment to vote before we get started this evening. I did want to obviously, this is my fair use statement. Obviously, to get more people to join us in this live stream this evening, make sure that you hit the likes when you come on in, and that will alert people that we are here and we are live, and it is Friday night. And why not? Tomorrow I've got to work on things for my graduate school, and people want to know why somebody my age would be back at school. Well, would you really want somebody educating future nurses who has no experience in the profession? These things take time sometimes, and I already have a teaching degree. So this is just an extra master's on top of it because they require so much nowadays. But anyway, if you do like commentary reactions from a licensed healthcare professional, then you've come to the right place. And so, yeah, thank you all for being here. Thank you, Catherine, for being here. I certainly do appreciate you being here and welcoming everybody. I'm obviously on the One Stream Live, so I'm always having fun with them. It's definitely the European model of a app to use because it's got like a la carte menu that you can purchase upgrades. So yeah, interesting. Okay, so far we have 21 votes. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. 86%. I think it's leaning towards the how I got married at 16, which is a shame because I actually think the salesman one was the far more interesting episode of Tim's. I'm really gonna say I might have to do a. I don't think I'm gonna get a chance to react to that video, but it seems that Tim was manipulating very young individuals within the military to buy these absolutely horrendous packages. And one of the things that he spoke about, we'll just share this while we're getting people to come on in and vote, was how much he said they cost. And so, what I understand is he was saying at the time that the cost of the package to buy this 8x10 like photo album, and then you get some coupons, and then you would also get a Bible sent to the family. It was like, it's like, oh gosh, he was going door to door selling Bibles in the 70s. And I want to say he said it was around 1977, 78, somewhere around there when he was doing this, maybe a little bit earlier. And so I took a look at the inflation calculator. And so had it been, say, 1978, and it was $365 that he was getting these individuals to sign up for, monthly payments at $20 a month, that was going to take them for years to obviously get these things paid off. It's just, and it would be in real money today, Tim asking for just over $1,800 for somebody who just joined the military. He was talking about wanting to try to buy a car, and Tim was going to take up a good old swath of their income with this photo album and some coupons for something and a Bible. And so he was trying to say that he had a better Bible because it had pictures in it. You can just tell that Tim, his entire life, because he obviously was somebody who decided to leave school early, which we'll hear in the How I Was Married at 16 video. Well, hopefully we'll get to it. We'll skip along a little bit because the most interesting part comes towards the end, and we're limited on time, obviously, tonight. Now, if he had bought, sold these, say, in 1976, when he was, say, a little bit older, calculate that would be over a $2,000 item, and I'm sure he didn't sell it as $365. I'm sure he made it sound like as little as $20 a month, and just, he said he spent 45 minutes in people's homes doing a presentation. Hey, come on in. Hey, come on in, everybody. So I can't imagine anything more irritating than having 45 minutes of Tim. And he talked about how he, kind of entered people's homes. And I just know that these types of sort of, and I'm going to say them for what I believe they are, kind of sleazy sales techniques. Tim still uses these today, and uses them to create his really terrible content that they have. That's my thought. That's my thought. That's my thought. All right. What do we have here on the votes over here? We have 81% want to look at the story of how I was married, and the other one's less. So I guess we're going to end up going to the one about how I was married. But maybe at some point we'll get to the salesperson, because it's interesting to see that, this is the sort of, type of price. If in 1976, if he purchased that item for $365 in 2025, it would now be over $2,000 that he was asking for these guys. And he said he made $100 on these sales. So Tim was taking home, $567. So I guess that's why he said he was happy if he sold 3 that day, because that means he did probably do pretty well. But obviously, despite supposedly making all this money and being a top salesperson and this, that, and the other, afternoon, Kevin, come on in. He did not save any money or buy a home or, seemingly maintain anything. So, yeah, I just find it interesting what the cost of it would be in real terms today. I'm sure I remember probably, gosh, people in the military having that stuff. And having come from a military family and, one that had served in the Navy, the Royal Navy and the American Navy, believe it or not, I would, I don't really like the idea of, manipulating service people because they're already pretty low on the pay scale. So seems that, Tim was this was his way of going, oh, it's a wild story. Okay, let's have a look at this poll because I think we're going to wrap it up. We're getting 23%. We got 31 votes now. Make sure to hit the like so people can see us. We have 31 votes so far. 23% want the salesperson. 72% are saying the married. We're going to just end the poll now just to get started and not be here all day long. And we'll just do the story of how I was married. But the fact that Tim was selling door-to-door Bibles was fascinating. You're a regular viewer of the show? How am I talking to myself? I want to know how I managed to put out my own message. I wonder if somebody has hijacked my account. How did I show up on my own account? Let me see if that one shows up. Yeah, that was interesting. All right. Okay. Bizarre. All right. I'm expecting all sorts of weird things. Okay, so let's take a look at this tab instead. Okay. Oh my goodness. So we got some real interesting videos out. Tim has been obviously popping out the content. This he talking about taking the car without permission from the dealer. He's very proud of these stories from the past, by the way. No shirt, no shoes, no problems. All right. And this is Tim's story. It's 41 minutes long. My goodness. Right. So if we're going to get into this, guys, we're going to go now, and I'm going to try to interrupt as little as possible. But I will say I do have to make some commentary in between, obviously, in order for it to be fair use. So I definitely have to make sure I do that. And I think at this point, okay, Tim, there's the stuff from the attorney. Okay. Because I think we need to add somebody else to the stream tonight. Yes, it is our good friend Jesus has come out. Because I think he needs to be here. Especially now he knows Tim sold Bibles to people for over $2,000 with a photo book and a couple of coupons. That's terrible. It's terrible. You know it's terrible. Hi, Sammy. Come on in. Hi, good evening. Hey, hi. Hey, hi, Garden Inspired Living. How are you? Yeah, Roscoe and Junebug are sleeping on chairs and couches at the moment. We've already had our night, and thank you, everybody. I did post a picture. They were actually eating treats at the time and eating up these alpha grandpas like Tim, talking about trying to give people strokes and coronary disease and all sorts of other stuff that's wild. I know I got feisty. Tim making me feisty. All right, Tim, are you 1.25? Yes, let's just get you. All right, take it away, Timmy.
Or whatever. But since I don't have much else, and since we were just talking about how it was in the 50s and the 60s and then in the 70s, and that's when it seemed like most of you out there, a lot of you have fond memories of growing up in the 70s as well. Now, I want to talk about my personal experiences, not just what I gleaned on the internet of the inventions or the things that started happening and what, you know.
I think some of the reaction channels we probably could figure out. We've looked at enough information, but I think since they are adults that are choosing probably not to be in Sarasota Tim's life, I think the kind thing to do to these individuals who already had to deal with this man as their father is just like let them lie in peace. If they want to show up and be part of Jim's content, that's their choice. But I think I'd like to respect their privacy.
Homes costs and all that. That's all very interesting. I have no idea their names compared to today.
Let's just keep doing this.
Let's go back. So in the 70s, I was a very young person in high school. I didn't grow up in the 70s as a young adult. I grew up in the 80s as a young adult. I was class of 77. I should have been class of 76, but I was held back a year when I was in the first grade because I didn't know my colors yet.
No, that's not usually why somebody is held back. And Tim says he doesn't know why or whatever reason in a second. Let me take a view on this app on OneStream Live. I don't know. This thing is acting well. Okay. So having been a first grade teacher and second grade teacher and having trained as an elementary school teacher, a reason why children are generally held behind in these early grades is because the child is not emotionally ready to go with their peers to the next class. Unless they are absolutely, but that generally it's due to more emotional reasons than anything else. Is whether or not the child has matured at an age that they will not be disruptive to the next grade up. So if their maturity is still seeming like they're in kindergarten or first grade and they don't seem like they're a child that's ready to move to the second grade, then the child will be held back. I don't think it's for just about colors. And his parents, oh, you'll hear the story from Tim. You'll hear the way that it just seems like there was a lot of different things. And I'm gonna be perfectly honest. From my perspective, I am somebody who had a very young parent, extremely young parent, who married at a very young age. I'm talking my mum married at 16. So that's pretty young. So I understand kind of what it's like to have a parent as young as Tim, though I don't think my mum was quite as irresponsible as Tim was. Now, arrested development would be interesting, but usually arrested development comes from parents who are very controlling of children and tend to coddle children and tend to arrest their development that way. And it's kind of a psychological term. It doesn't have a place within the DSM-5 text revision at all. And so I don't think the way that Tim talks about his childhood, and obviously this is all speculation. This is all, obviously, I'm not treating, I'm not diagnosing. This is just for entertainment, education purposes only. Everything I'm saying is just my opinions only, and that's it. And I'm going to preface it. And I have studied, obviously, a lot of child psychology, psychiatry. I was a teacher, like I said. So, yeah, it's an interesting thing. But, yeah, Tim is a professional liar. Absolutely. We don't know her name. And I think at this point, we just, unless he says it, we will respect. He has had videos, so take a look at his channel. I think there are some videos with his daughter.
I'm serious. We moved around a lot or whatever, and they didn't feel that I, knew how to stand in line right, knew all my colors. So I had to repeat the first grade. They don't fail kids today. It doesn't matter how bad you are. They just push you right on through the education system. So because I repeated the first grade and really got my colors down, that's why
I don't know if that's true or not. I don't work in the education system anymore. Tim talking about his colors, standing in line. It sounds like it was a maturity thing. It sounds like Tim maybe. I like I said, I don't want to speculate. Obviously, I am a pediatric RN too, so I specialize in children. So, for all of the people who want to say I have no ability to speak about any of these topics, well, I do have a Bachelor of Education. I did work as a teacher. I used to teach teachers how to teach. I taught all ages. I'm training as a nurse educator. I work as a pediatric nurse. I've worked with lots of children. So, I don't know.
Turned out to be so smart. All kidding aside, though, that's really what happened.
I don't know.
Apparently, rent came due, and we were
some
poor
weird
white people
stuff going on here.
And so I was held back in the first grade. So I was class of 77, which makes me, 16, 17 years old around that age. I guess you're supposed to be 18 when you graduate high school. Yeah. So I was class.
Well, Tim had 3 children, so I'm not sure because he never indicates which gender they are, but they're all 3 children altogether.
Class of 77, but you ready for this? This is why I thought it might be kind of corny to share, but hey, what do I care? What do I care? So in my sophomore year,
which is
10th grade, I should have been the 11th, but I was in the 10th, and I was 16 years old. And just before school was to finish and break for the summer, and I was going to go into the 11th grade, a junior, I decided to bail and go to California back to my mom from my father's house. So what happened was I was living in California when I was in the 5th grade or 6th grade, and then I came to Florida to live with my biological father. I got a stepfather, my real father, and I went to junior high school, which was 7 and 8. We had junior high in those days. I think they call it middle school now. So I did go to 7 and 8, and then I went to 9 and 10. So I spent 4 years living in Lake Worth, Florida, went to Lake Worth Junior High, and I went to Lake Worth High School. In that 4 years that I lived there, prior to coming there to live with my father, who did not raise me, my mom and him divorced when I was like 5. And so I was basically raised by a stepfather until the time of which.
It's so interesting, some of the things that I find to be somewhat parallel, and I'm sure other people do, and then think about how your life, what trajectory it took. I know that my parents divorced when I was very young in the 1970s, and my parents were both very young parents. Like I said, my mother had me at 17, I'll be honest. And my real father at the time, he would have been maybe coming up to 21, having just turned 21. Obviously, having married so young, the marriage was not probably going to last, and nor did it. And they divorced when I was probably about 7, I want to say. And then my mother obviously remarried, and I had a stepfather too. But obviously, in some ways, Tim and my life took completely different trajectories. I was somebody, I mean, I can't say I was like the biggest fan of higher education, but I've managed to spend about every decade of my life since being a teenager within the confines of it.
Which I wanted to move back to Florida with my real father. What happened was I think I turned 13. And when I became a teenager, I told my mom that, I'd like to live with my dad now. And my dad was more of an affluent. He had money. He owned his home. And my mother, when I grew up with her, it was a very poor family scene. We moved a lot. Nobody owned anything, kind of like I am now. But in all seriousness, that's what it was. And my mom and my stepfather had split. So now I'm just living at home with a brother and my mom. I have a brother, and I have no idea where he is. He's been in trouble since he could crawl. And
well, Tim was held back a year. So Tim, having left school at 16, is not even the age of where I believe the grade. I'm not very familiar with American grading systems for schools, so I apologize. They're very different in the UK. He would have still been a lower grade than what the average grade was. Tim was not somebody. He'll tell you.
I've got brothers and sisters that are from when my mom remarried and when my father remarried. I'm losing you already, right? That's why when I started telling the story, they're like, I told it to one friend of mine in Georgia, this old Southern guy. He's very cool. God rest his soul. He's like, that's good, Tim. That's good. Because most people, they grew up in the same home, the same town, the same parents. Not everybody, but mostly, I would think. And so anyway, because my mother and my father remarried multiple times, multiple times, and had kids, I had these halves and 3/4 and fractions of siblings, of which were on the other side of the country, because when my parents separated, one did kind of go to California and one kind of stayed in Georgia, South Carolina.
I mean, Tim obviously had some interesting role models as parents. And I think that, inherently around this time, because Tim, it was so funny hearing him talk about the 1950s. He was born like in 1958. It would be like me talking about how much I remember the 1960s. And I was born in August 1969. So how much of the 1960s do I feel part of? My first memories are really in the 70s. I don't oh, thank you, Junebug. I don't remember anything, obviously, of the 60s. And so Tim is a very interesting character for how he reminisces and looks back. But yeah, I mean, he obviously had a family, and his mom was somebody that it seems that when she remarried, it did not lead to completely long-term stability. I guess in the respect that my mother, when she remarried, she is still married to that person to this day. And they've been married, I don't even know how many years that. It's like 40 years, 40 some years, 45 years. It's been so long. It's been like 1979. So obviously that gave a different sense of stability in my life that I don't think Tim was given. But then again, these are all Tim's stories. And as other people have said, he has said in the past, he doesn't remember a lot of his childhood. So, we always have to remember Tim's a salesperson. This is a guy who would get himself into people's homes for 45 minutes and sell pictured Bibles. So it's just remember, this is who this person is.
Somewhere. And my father, he's the one that remarried more times than my mother. And he had children from each one of his wives. And so they're not stepbrothers and sisters, they're half. So we have the same father, and some of my siblings, I have the same mother. But the one brother I have, who's been in trouble his entire life, he, I don't know where he is. I really don't. We fell out a long time ago. And I'm the eldest. But I've always seemed to kind of keep my nose clean. I've never had any run-ins with the law. I've never been in jail. I've never done anything,
What do you consider a run-in with the law, Tim? Because you got some reckless drivings in your past. I mean, that's just like a misdemeanor. But you certainly have a lot of driving infractions. I know, I do too. But I would at least say I had some driving infractions back in my day. You certainly got caught in Carolina quite a few times because you can't drive around in North Carolina and act the fool and not get caught. I'll tell you that much. You better drive carefully and to the speed limit in North Carolina because they will get you. And Tim was got quite a few times and somewhere else like Missouri. But he certainly isn't clean on his driving record in the 1990s. And you know it, Tim. At least, and then potentially in the 80s. But that's the records that I've seen, Tim.
Anything like that, ever. The only thing I wanted to do since I could crawl, and since my stepfather used to take me to work with him to set tile, and I would carry water in a paint bucket, and I'd wash his tools.
Right.
And he'd be sitting on the side of a tub, racking tile on the wall. We called it mud jobs. They didn't have mastic in those days where you just put glue on the wall and stick it on. We floated off the wall with mortar, straight edges and strips, and we carried lime and cement and sand in the back of his truck and a big thing, a mortar box, looked like a boat. And we would just hoe this mix back and forth. I'd go get water, seemed like for an hour, and this cement kept absorbing it, and we'd hoe it back and forth until it would mix. And
see, the way people remember JFK passing is how I remember when I heard that Elvis died. That's true, because I had a cousin who was a huge Elvis fan, like as a child. She absolutely adored Elvis. And I remember when he passed away. So that was, I guess, my JFK was Elvis. Slightly different circumstances, obviously, as to how they passed, but just notable figures.
Make this mud, and I'm getting on a different tangent. But anyway, I learned how to be a man. He put money in my pocket. He gave me a wallet. He taught me respect. He snatched a knot in my tail when I needed it, meaning I got my ass whooped with a belt. And I esteem him, God rest his soul. Both my stepfather and my father have gone on to be with the Lord. I count him as my father because really he raised me and treated me like his own. He really did. More than he did my brother, because my brother was like this little outcast.
Yes, that's what I say. It's going to take him a while to even get to the point where he gets married. You just have to listen to whatever. He tries to paint out that his brother was an outcast. Don't worry, Tim. We can find out who your brother is and find out where he's at for you. Supposedly I stalk just because I looked up his car on Texas Auto Value. It's a VIN number. Promise you, we'll find out how much it sold for, Tim. Because at some point, it's going to show up on a VIN verified report. And it's on that VIN number. It's not connected to you, sir. So we're going to find out exactly how much they gave you for that car.
black sheep in the family.
Be aware, Tim. Be prepared.
So after I had worked with my stepfather and kind of learned a lot of maturity, I'm talking about when I was out of school in the summer, and I'm 5 years old going to work with him when I wasn't going to school. So when I got to be about 12 and 13 and 11 is when I had paper routes. I was going door to door asking people to take the paper. Well,
Tim, that's what a lot of children did at those ages. I was babysitting and I had a little like entrepreneurial lawnmower business. I think I tried a paper route, but I found out that I really wasn't fond of waking up that early to deliver papers for that little amount of money. Did not last very long on a paper route. I much more preferred doing childcare, where I was at night, often, left with a plate full of nice snacks and being able to watch movies on TV. So, and away from my parents for the night. Once the kids went to sleep, which usually was fairly early, it was a lot of time to just chill, even with bad British television.
Going out there at 3 a.m, dropping papers off at 12 years old on a bicycle with all the paper stuffed in a poncho. You've seen them back in the day. Then I would go collect the money once a month from everybody. So I was becoming like a businessman, a salesman, and I had this drive where I went out and knocked on doors. It's hard for me to even say I was that young, but that's how old I was, because when I was, I think, maybe 14 is when I came to Florida to live with my real father. So, but going back to when I lived with my mother after my stepfather left and they went their own ways, I was just there alone and I didn't have that father. And she was just sort of like, not interested in a lot of things.
I understand, Anne. I was somebody that my mother, when she remarried, she didn't just take us across the country. She took me to another country. A completely different country. And I wasn't that young. And so I had to navigate a very different, and even though they spoke English, I promise you, Scotland in 1979 was a very different culture from the one I had been living in, even in small town Virginia, here in Virginia Beach, which was a small town, believe it or not, at the time. So it was my mother was still quite young, so she wasn't that mature to be able to handle even what was going on then. So, and I think it's, like I said, it's interesting because obviously I can see parallels. But I guess it is, in he made one choice as to where he wanted to do life with his wanting to further himself through education. And I feel that Tim, in a lot of ways, and you'll hear it kind of in his talk, was more about, taking care of Tim. And I think we all want to take care of ourselves, but I think, with a fair amount of objectiveness, I don't know. I was always more focused on trying to, educate. Don't get me wrong. I had a blast during the 90s in Mexico and London. I had a lot of fun. Probably more fun than Sarasota Tim's ever seen.
It wasn't a very good family scene. And again, this drive I had in me, I don't know how I found him, but I reached out to him. And my mom said, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. So my father flew me or put me on a Greyhound bus, I forgot which, from California by myself to West Palm Beach, Florida, Lake Worth. And I show up. He's married. He's got 2 kids from a previous marriage where he kept custody. And he has a child with her. So he's got 3 there, 1 kind of small, 2 very close in age, about 5 years or 6 years younger than me. And then I show up, 14, 15 years old. So now he got 4 kids, a teenager and all the way down. And his wife, she's only got 1 other than the 2 that he had when he met her that she took on. So she had to care for them, I suppose. But when I showed up, it started teetering the thing a little bit too much. I don't know whether he consulted her or what he did, but he was always good, because there was another time in my life when I was really small that I went to live with him, or visit him actually. And he didn't want me to go home. He wanted to keep me. And my mom and my stepfather at the time, who was raising me, they were like, no, they weren't having that. And so they came and got me. You know, that's another story. But like I said, after the stepfather left, I was by myself with my mom and my brother, and he was just getting into trouble, and I didn't want anything to do with that. And she was out a lot and doing her thing, and I just wanted, you know, success. And it was really a godsend. So my father had me come to Florida.
There's a lot that he's saying there. Oh my goodness, there's just a lot. I try, it's you know, I'm just kind of listening to him, and he obviously, his mum was probably like, okay, you want to get to your dad. His dad obviously was kind, let him come on by. You know, I think it's you know, a situation that probably happened to a number of people, sadly, during their childhoods, where there was one parent wasn't, you know, working out, the other parent was, you know, saying, okay, that's fine, you can go ahead. Because sometimes there's parents that, you know, parents won't just, you know, quite, you know, seemingly contentedly let the other, you know, child go with the other parent. But I think things were a little bit different in how custody was arranged during our times when our divorces were happening. I think it was a very different time. And so yeah, it's interesting. And you have to wonder how much of this has obviously shaped the man who we see today. And you know, how much is this you know, everything is also given to everybody's perspective of how they remember things. And so just always be cautious and careful and, you know, comforting to your own mental health as he looks back into his childhood, and just ensuring that it doesn't, you know, remind you of anything potentially, because Tim doesn't care if he triggers anybody's emotions. He's really, it's, you know, he's unaware of reading the room on that. And I know that there's some sensitive topics that he is bringing up throughout this live stream. As much as we kind of, you know, kind of have a little bit of a chuckle about it, I know in reality, there's a lot of things that, like I said, could be revealed, but it's so hard with Tim. I know a lot of these things, they're all verified. You know, we know, you know, the marriages that Darling did a video about, how many, you know, his marriages and when he got married and so forth, and the names of his different spouses. And I certainly know the names of his children and when they were born, but, you know, like I said, in respect for their privacy, and some of them don't even want to potentially have contact with him. I don't think it's fair to have to bring him into his mire.
And I started in middle school, junior high school, and I found, you know, the things that we did in the 70s. I got a 10-speed bike. I rode it to school every day. Everybody had bikes. We didn't have busing. And I don't even know if there was. Maybe there was. But I rode a 10-speed bike. I met friends. And somehow or another, the middle school, the junior high school, I think I only had, it was 7 and 8.
Yeah, that is interesting. He can't remember if he flew by plane or was riding by car. You think a significantly long trip at that age you would remember. I certainly remember all the times that I flew, even at a very young age of like 3. My mum was quite happy sticking me on planes alone at a very young age to go see my grandma in Virginia from South Carolina in the 1970s. I don't even know what to say. I did my first solo international travel at the age of 15. So, by plane. So, I can understand, you know, but I don't know if it was because I was a girl and he's a boy, you know, because I certainly was a decade later. So I'm not that far away from when Tim grew up. I mean, it's only a decade. It's not a huge amount of difference between Tim and I, really.
8. I think I only had a little bit of 7 to go before I went into 8. And so it was maybe a year and a half or a year and a little bit that I was in junior high when I came to Florida. And then it was on to high school, which was right down the street, Lake Worth High School. Boy, has that school changed. They built more buildings onto it. It's still there, but it was a whole different thing. And those were the days of all the memories of everything we talked about the other day on the 70s that I lived. I mean, the girls, the beach, the surfing, experimenting with things.
He could just be throwing his brother under the bus. We don't know. Brother could be better off than he is with a good job and a house than Tim throwing him under the bus. You just never know with Tim.
Playing football in school, sports, and all of that. And so freshman,
Mr. Baker.
And then we went to sophomore. And then what happened
I have
was,
no idea.
During my sophomore year and in my freshman year, it had been building up. The situation with my stepmother was eroding. It wasn't good chemistry. I didn't hate her. I don't think she hated me, but it just didn't. It's been so many years now, I can't remember. But I remember it wasn't good. It seemed like, and I might have been imagining this, that she was trying to get me in trouble, or if I didn't get good grades, and then I was made to feel, less than if I got a C or a D. I never got any Fs, but I was definitely not an A student. I got plenty of Ds and Cs in school. I just wasn't into school. I think I'm pretty smart now about a lot of things, but I
really, Tim. And I feel you, Gen X. I had to walk to school too. I promise you. I was not coddled as a child at all. My mother was pretty tough, and my stepfather was an officer in the Royal Navy. So, and he was, it's partly the reason why my relationship, I do have obviously a relationship, but it's somewhat cold, just because of, they're not particularly touchy-feely people. So I feel you about walking in the rain. I do find it interesting, though, what Tim just said here. So let's just replay that back right here, because I kind of forgot what he said, but I found it interesting.
Less than if I got a C or a D. I never got any Fs, but I was definitely not an A student. I got plenty of Ds and Cs in school. I just wasn't into school. I think I'm pretty smart now about a lot of things.
That's what I wanted to cover. Even though I'm somebody who obviously has a ridiculous amount of education, I don't feel that being, that you have to have a college degree or any of these things to be an intelligent individual. I do not believe that. But Tim, I think, shows us time and time again, just alone with the recent Honda purchase and sale, just how smart he really is. He's supposedly a car guy. That was his thing. Cars. Supposedly he grew up with a father who was in the car industry, who was working at dealerships and had a history of working at dealerships from a very early age. Yet he made probably one of the biggest mistakes that anybody would make with a vehicle, and that anybody who's within the car industry would probably tell you never to do. And that's buy a new car and sell it within a year and take literally the entire hit of the depreciation. And we'll find out how much it depreciated by. But I don't think that's very smart, Tim. And that's the one thing that you're supposed to have some expertise on. So I still will challenge you to just how intelligent you are sometimes, Tim. I do feel that you could have benefited from slightly more education. And having time in school doesn't also negate from you becoming street smart. You can still attend formal education and still have common sense and still get street smart. Surprisingly, you can do all three.
But I wasn't good in school. I learned typing and my math and English and those kinds of things. Phys ed, sports, whatever.
All right. I don't want to be harsh. I also took typing just because I said to myself at the time, and I'm kind of glad I did, computers were starting to come up. And I said, I think I'd like to know how to type on these things pretty rapidly. And best thing I ever did, because at college, we were required to submit computer typed papers. And so I was able to make money at college typing people's papers up for them, because I could do like 50, 60 words a minute. But I wonder, for Tim being a a male at like 15, 16 taking typing classes? I think Tim was just trying to get in with the girls. Tim was just trying to get in trouble with the girls from an early age. That's what he's talking about too. Tim was he was just in trouble, man. He was a troublemaker, I bet.
You know, I can read, write. I'm not dumb. But there was just something about me. I think a lot of 70s kids, I knew a lot of them when I went to school, they got about the same kind of grades I did. So come along when I turned 16, I took a driver's ed class. Couldn't wait for that in high school. You know, you take driver's ed in school. Now you take a test,
Yeah.
and you become of age, you go to the DMV. Maybe your parents teach you a little bit with their car. You get your restriction license.
That's it. That's right, Sammy. We were basically, and that's one of the things that I thought too. I was always like, you know what? If I can type, I'll always get a job, which is funny because nowadays, obviously, there's no such thing as a typing pool. But we would be sorely hurting without having typing skills. I promise you, when I'm typing like today, you know, typing up my patient notes and stuff, I have to do a lot of typing, a lot of charting, constant charting. It's been a godsend. And the funny thing is I don't know, I guess because these kids are, you know, on computers from an early age, but I don't know if they learn how to formal type like we did. So I wonder if they still have like the keyboard speed, you know, and the QWERTY that we had. It'd be interesting. I know they can go fast on the phones, you know, but whether they can, would they be as fast as some of us on the keyboard?
I got my restrictor license, meaning I could drive with someone that was in the car that was over 18, over 18 or 21. So, you know, my dad was in the car business and he always had a brand new demo and he would let me drive when we would go out. I'd be asking him, you know, can I drive? Can I drive? And he would let me. And I was a very good driver, like Rain Man.
Right.
I'm a really good driver.
Yeah.
And then when I got to be, I think I was 15, and when you become 16, you actually get your license where you can drive alone.
Yes.
There might have been some restrictions at night or whatever, but you could drive without somebody else in the car. And I remember, I'll never forget it. He brought home an SS or a Rally Sport Camaro, banana yellow, with the console, bucket seats, and he let me drive it. This is in the 70s. You know, they made some pretty good motors in those days. They weren't like those cars in, you know, much later years, all the smog stuff on them. And I would go over to John Prince Park. It's a big park over there. And I was cruising through and around over and over and over, you know, who can see me? And, you know, I just feeling so cool driving this brand new car. Came from nothing, you know, when growing up with my mom and stepfather, we were, you know, they were never going to be able to provide anything like that to me. And then one day, my dad, because he was in the car business, came home with a Delta 88, a 67 or I think it was a 67 Oldsmobile Delta 88 with a 455 in it, 2-door coupe, column shift, bucket seats, AM radio, radial tires, but in absolute new condition. And
Tim has always been obsessed and in love with cars. Make sure to hit the likes on the way in, guys, to get this live stream out. But Tim has definitely always been somebody interested in cars, but not necessarily really. But the funny thing is like he's never become a car mechanic, which, you know, could have been a good profession, but I guess that's just too much work. Tim talks about the fact he obviously just wanted to make money. Sales is, you know, often the easiest way if that's really what you want to do. Make money. In the days when Tim was growing up, the best way to make that type of income and not necessarily have to have the highest levels of education was to go into sales. That's still very common probably nowadays for young people to go into car sales. I don't know if they require a huge amount of education or not.
it was $500. I mean, he was able to get it in cheap on trade. Those were back in the days. He was the manager, and I was saving my money. I was a busboy. I was a dishwasher. I was a pot washer. We used to look in the newspaper for one-liner ads to get a job, and I would work weekends, part-times, nights while going to school to make money. I still wanted to make money. I was always wanting to make money. And so I was saving, and he brought it home and said it was $500. I had to pay for it, and I was glad to get it. Unlike today, when people come home with cars to their kids and they say, you know, or take them to buy a car and they're picky about the color. You know, When my dad brought the car home, he said, "That's your car. I'm glad to get it." And I never will forget, too, during ownership of that Delta 88, I would go over to Lake Osborne, a couple of gals that I dated, and we'd sit there on the shoulder on the side of the road, like Lover's Point. But it wasn't like down a dirt road or anywhere spooky or scary. It was right on the drive around this lake. It's right near the high school. And, we'd hold hands and kiss and whatever. And, those old radio tunes, if they came back, if I heard one now, it would take me back.
Tim just lighting up, thinking about making out with those girls back in the day. Tim is so desperate for love, ladies. If anybody is needing to give a lonely old man a shoulder to rest a weary brow on, Tim is looking for love, guys. So just letting you know. He does want a traditional woman, though. He's perplexed. In recent videos, Tim has complained that women are different nowadays. They don't seem to want men like they used to. When you've got real winners out here like Tim, just laying around single ladies. What are you thinking? You could be rolling beef and cheese up in a roll and snacking it down with Keto King Timmy over here. You could be getting your sweat on at Nathan Benderson Park. You could be, you could help him not feel so lonely on the beach. He was complaining about how much he spent on that. That darn, gosh, I can't believe the words escaped me. What's a diggy? He rolls down the beach. I can't believe I'm like my brain. God, I've got the tot syndrome. It's on the tip of my tongue. Oh gosh, you know what I'm talking about.
It would really just take me right back.
It's tired today.
It wasn't like an impressive Nova or Camaro. Stuff like the varsity and the seniors were driving. They were, motorcycles, and those guys were big and tough, and they were seniors, and we're still punks, right? We're just freshmen and sophomores. But nonetheless, I had my own car, and I'm feeling very grown up again, which is another step for me to really feel independent and grown up. And this is something that my real father,
well, Gail, you could always, go trans-coastal and pop over to Sarasota. There's a masculine man out here. He'll go shirtless for you, girl.
I said that he didn't raise me, and my stepfather was a little closer with me. This is what he did for me, of which I appreciate. He also taught me all about fishing. My dad was a big fisherman. We went to the Bahamas on compass, to Freeport, which is only 60 miles off the Lake Worth Inlet. And we went over there together and came back. And he taught me a lot of stuff about diving, fishing, rigging baits, going out like that, backing the boat in. We did it all together. We come home, flush the engine, clean the boat. I mean, we were like a team. I had this. And then the stepmother, back to her, I think she was a little jealous of that closeness because I was the eldest that he was enjoying, with his firstborn that he didn't raise, but he was able to teach him about the fishing and all that. And I just think that, that bothered her to some degree. And so, like I said, she was always seemed like trying to get me in trouble. And
Tim, you're presupposing what her intentions were. I mean, you don't know that. I mean, I guess that's how you felt. I mean, perception is a big part of the reality, I guess, too. I'm sorry that you felt that way, that she wanted you not there. It's possible. I don't know about jealousy. Who knows? But I understand. There's times where, that happens where parents have remarried and children feel isolated from that new relationship, or they don't feel like they fit in, or they feel the other parent is, doesn't like them, or the new parent, the step parent. Of course, it happens, unfortunately. So I think in the times when Tim was talking too, I think there was a lot less understanding about having blended families and so forth. So I think potentially the adults were less attuned to it and what was happening with young people. I think definitely we grew up a lot differently in those times. Whether it was better, worse, it's hard to say. I'm sure I know I got some things that were probably not particularly ideal for children, just because it's, I don't think the adults in my life were necessarily aware of children and their feelings. I think it just didn't really matter. I've always felt that, kind of you were kids, you got with your stuff, and you kind of let the adults be. That's at least how it was in my home. And I think that was kind of pervasive around this time.
He'd come home and she had sort of said something to him on the phone that day at work, and he had to come home and let's do this fatherly talk to me, like Leave It to Beaver days. And I didn't like that. It was like, oh, they're against me. And so I started feeling different. And I had this car. And this is the part of the story that I've always been reluctant to share. I think I've already alluded to it. But anyway, I had this good friend of mine named Kenny. I won't give his last name. But Kenny, he seemed like not be real happy with his home either. But that was his mom and dad. He was raised by his own mom and dad. Born and raised. I mean, I think he was in that same house. But he was ready to fly the coop and go. So I had said, look.
Well, Tammy can confirm if Tim was there that day and scuttled off when the truck hit Dwayne, in our opinion, allegedly. Because didn't Tim say he was supposed to be helping out a friend that day? And then he went out west pretty soon. I know it's all conspiracy, but we're allowed to make conspiracy. That's what the internet's about. When you got payasos like Tim out here trying to be alpha grandpa and trying to take everybody out with a coronary artery disease or a stroke. I mean, what do you expect?
My mom is in California. We're down here in Florida. I mean, we couldn't go any further across the country, right? And so I said, my mom is out there and she'll take us in and let's just run away from home and go to California. How can we do it? Let's put some money together. So I'm saving all my tip money I was getting. I was working at IHOP as a busboy. I was doing the graveyard shift, and the waitresses would tip me out. At the end of the night, I'd bust their tables, and I was going down to the bank every morning with pockets full of change.
He really does.
And I'd put it at the teller window. I was depositing everything I could. I didn't want to spend anything to get this gas money, to get ready. And Kenny was doing the same. And so the time came. And what I did was I asked my father if I could drive my car to Lake Okeechobee here in Florida with Kenny. And
okay, so I'm just going to be a quick explainer here in regards, and obviously I don't treat or diagnose. These are just based on my studies of the DSM-5, studies around obviously individuals with antisocial personality disorders and certain behaviors that are seen. And you have to remember that the story that Tim is telling is a story of a 16-year-old who held back a year at school already and has persuaded another young person to leave his home and leave to go across country, with both of them not informing their parents. Now, whether or not he felt a close kinship with his father or how strained the relationship with his stepmother was, the whole sort of crux of it is that Tim in this story brought another young person along with him. Now, without Tim's car and the ability to travel, this young man probably wouldn't have left. And so I guess my point is that in reality, it is showing signs of a deviant behavior, because Tim was not an adult, and certainly not with his frontal lobe, because your frontal lobe doesn't fully develop until you're 25 years old. So any decisions that generally that we are making, it's just part of brain development under the age of 25. We don't have our frontal lobes fully developed. So a lot of the rationality that we use to make good decisions and make them with clarity and not have risky behaviors is really not fully developed until we reach 25. which is why in reality, having people, be 18 and be able to go into the military kind of helps in some ways, because obviously they're going to be a little bit more less cautious in some ways. They've got a little bit more because they just don't have that development. And so in reality, the story that I hear from Tim is a young man who's actually displaying some early signs of what could be part of sort of an antisocial personality, somebody who is something of a social deviant, because this is not, really what the behavior should be. Now, I could say certain things from what was going on in my mother's childhood, but obviously this isn't a conversation about my mother. And so choices that we make, because we do have a moral code, even at that age. We do have some understanding of right and wrong and what should be done. And just having two people run, that's not a good sign. Tim talking about trying to twist this as a sign of maturity, actually, in reality, shows a lot of immaturity, because you really weren't thinking through fully what the consequences of these decisions would be. It was very impulsive, and Tim seems to be somebody who, in my opinion, shows a great deal of impulsivity. And that's just kind of, what I'm hearing. And so, and when we look at individuals with antisocial behaviors and these types of things, one of the things that we look for are things that they did within their childhood. So, for example, you can't suddenly just be like an antisocial adult without really having had that pattern in your childhood. And as much as Tim wants to say his brother was the one getting in trouble, I think that this would be, for a lot of young people, probably getting them in trouble, especially taking somebody else with you on the adventure and not telling anybody. And the lies and the whole story and the planning involved in committing this. So it's not a sign of maturity at all. It's actually the sign of, obviously, somebody who was very unhappy but was willing to take somebody else along. And Tim does seem to be somebody who does have a codependency, because he's been married so many times. That's very telling as well, I think, with somebody, in my opinion.
This family, they were going to go fishing, and Kenny and I wanted to drive, take my own car, and we were going to be, his parents were going, and we were going to be camping, I don't know, for 2 or 3 days, something like that. And he agreed, which nothing like that was ever going to happen. That was just giving us 3 days before they were even going to look for us. We had no cell phones. There was no way to check on us. And I'm just remembering that right now. That was probably one of the big deals there, how we got away with it. So we took all the money out of the bank, whatever I had, whatever gas cost at the time. And Kenny and I, and we got cans of pork and beans and Spam and a cooler full of bread and bologna and mayonnaise. And we took turns driving, and we drove from Lake Worth, Florida to San Diego, California. I think 2.5, 3 days. It was record. We drove 24/7. One would sleep in the back, one was driving. And I don't know how we didn't get pulled over. Maybe the speed limit was 70 all the way across the country, but we were doing 80 at least. And that 455 could run. So 2 or 3 days go by, and I'm supposed to show back up at the house.
I think we certainly took risks, but I mean, he literally ran away from home and brought somebody along with him because his mother wasn't expecting him. So Tim pretty much planned a runaway. So this is beyond just taking a risk. I promise you, I probably took some risks too. I'm sure we all did. We certainly didn't have our parents keeping an eye on us the way maybe parents do nowadays. But this is like, and I know, but it still was only it wasn't like it was happening in the 1940s. He's only 10 years older than I am. So this would have been in the 70s. So it still would have been seen a little bit, as somebody who is obviously, kind of leaving home early. I mean, it's still somebody who was not anywhere near voting age or adulthood, and certainly shouldn't have been taking a car across country at such a young age. It's pretty bad. It's just not. It's, like I said, the worst part of it is if he'd done it on his own, that's fine. But he took somebody else along with him. That's the part where it's like just Tim is just, she doesn't realize how much he's saying. It's not cool. Shows a lot more, poor planning than anything else.
There's no way to reach me. I don't have a cell phone or a beeper or anything like that. It didn't even exist. And
yeah, exactly.
He had no idea. Missing in action.
Thank you, Sam.
Thinking about it now, maybe worried. I mean,
like,
what happened to us? But I don't even think he knew about Kenny. I don't even think he knew his parents. Thinking about it now, I don't even know if he ever put that together.
16, Sharon.
I eventually let him know,
15 to
once
16.
I got back to my mom's house that, I was with my mom, so it wasn't but 4 or 5 days later.
Oh, okay.
But getting back to it, on the way over there, Kenny and I ran out of money and gas in Arizona, and we got another state to go to get into California. So we picked up this hitchhiker, and he said, if you go to this church, they'll give you these gas chits, these little gas coupon coins that you take to a gas station, and it's only good for gas. So you can't use it for drugs or beer or anything like that. And that's what I remember. And that's what we did. This hitchhiker knew about it, and he was, hitching a ride with us. And we said, well, you got any gas money? Because we don't have any gas. And we were able to, on fumes, roll into no money into San Diego to my mother's.
Even I would have been weary of strangers as a kid. I remember there was one time this weird couple pulled up in front of a friend of mine's house when she and I were playing outside, and they had like that 70s van that looked like it was a rapist van, and they opened up the door and were trying to call us over, and I just said to my friend, let's get in the house and let's tell the adults. These adults are weird. Hey, I knew a weird scammer even as a kid. I was calling scammers and weirdos out. And the fact that Tim wouldn't think about his safety on a cross-country trip at such a young age and running out of, this was the era when definitely there were all sorts of interesting characters up and down America's highways, and very prolific times. I wouldn't think it was safe. Tim out here dragging his poor kid Kenny along with him. And it doesn't make you sound cool, Tim. It makes you sound like I promise you, my time with my parents wasn't great either. It was blinking awful. I'll let you know. It was pretty bad. It was really bad. I did not have, my mom wasn't always the kindest of individuals, but I certainly wouldn't put myself at such risk. I just, just waited it out and got myself to college so that I could make an intelligent escape. That was my plan. See, Timothy and I took totally different routes. And I promise you, I spent a lot of nights out of my home, as much as I possibly could.
I pulled into my mother's sister's house,
so I
where my mom was.
On a rough household.
And,
I wouldn't have done that.
Of course, I can't remember now, but it was like, oh, wow, who are you? What are you doing back? Or good to see you, or something like that. And I explained to her, hey, I'm a man now. Nobody's going to tell me what to do. I left my father. I left you. I went to my father.
Oh,
I'm a man.
Sorry.
And I got a car. It wasn't like that really, but I just, wasn't going to go back to school, and she wasn't going to enforce it either. So she was still doing her nothing life thing and living in these very poor apartments. And then I go over there. My friend Kenny, in no time, was shipped back to Florida because he started hanging out with my brother, who was the troublemaker, and they got in some kind of trouble. And the law came, found them, not where my mom lives, but wherever they were.
Oh, I had an aunt who lived in a commune, Anne, so in California in the 70s. So there was definitely some, freely, and like I said, I certainly am somebody who partied with the best of them through the 1990s, and went to a lot of raves. So I was just a different type of generation. I was definitely of the, and they still do raves. Prodigy still plays to this day. So I was more of a club kid. And I went to a lot of clubs around the globe, all over the place. I had just, was in college and stuff. I just realized that education was going to be the thing to get me the best future. So I just, that's what I, made sure of. And I still got married young. Only been married once. Not as young as Timmy, though.
Were whatever they were doing.
I think we all had pretty tough times.
Kenny's a minor, and they're like, well, where do you live? And he's like, well, I live, my parents are in Florida. So he was gone. Never saw him again. And I'm hanging out with my mom.
Yeah.
And there was a woman that was 26 years old with 2 kids that lived upstairs from my mom in these not very nice apartment complex. And she looked out the window and saw me, and I was a 16-year-old, Florida, tanned. I had blonde hair down to here, long hair, 150, 60 pounds maybe, wringing wet, concave stomach, slim, thin. And she, I don't know, liked what she saw. And before you know it, this 26-year-old, who's not too terribly old, certainly not to me now, but was 10 years older than me. Well, she ended up teaching me a few things, and I was in lust. I was definitely like, man, I've hit the big time. I go to Florida, quit school, run away. Mom is not really going to really enforce a lot of rules on me. I'm not going to go back to school. I meet this woman, and she's teaching me about, stuff. And
that's wild. Any 26-year-old woman with kids wanting to be interested in a 16-year-old boy. Yeah, it's kind of tough. The way Tim describes it, he tries to, obviously make out just the vanity of the way he describes himself. It's just, it's difficult because it's, we want to say it's a different time, but no, he was still a young man and the fact that his mother wasn't even trying to, I guess she probably knew there was no point if he just, driven across country in a car. There was very little that I think that his mother felt that she could do. Tim was definitely a handful, I think, and that was his personality. He's still a handful to this day. And I think, like I said, a lot of us didn't have ideal. And was there ecstasy at those clubs that I went to, Gen X? Oh, yeah. All over the place. There was all sorts of substances around in the 90s, especially in the clubs in London and stuff. And I'm sure even in Mexico City, because I went to clubs in Acapulco. I mean, I loved to dance. I would dance all night. Not anymore. But I did love to dance.
I am like head over heels.
Drugs everywhere.
And
rugs,
so
I should say.
We had a kid. And I was very, very young. And we went to, we were going to go live together. And then in the state of California, you remember when they used to call it shacking up? Well, some apartments and stuff, they didn't allow that. If you weren't married, you could be shacking up. That was kind of like taboo. It wasn't like today where anything goes. So we said, don't worry, we'll get married. And found out I couldn't get married in California, even with parental consent at that age because of the different laws. But if you drove to Yuma, Arizona, to the Arizona line, you could with parental consent. And my mother gave consent because she was pregnant and going to have a child. And I wanted to marry her, and we wanted to be together. And so she agreed. Naturally.
Yes. And that probably sounded like my mother was also pregnant and, needed to get married in a small town in Virginia. And I know a lot of my friends also, even in the UK, had very similar stories. Many of us were the products of romantic relationships prior to marriage. I think a lot of us worked that out. It didn't take rocket science to work out, 10 months. And people always say 9. The reason why people say 9 months is because by the time someone finds out they are with child, it's 9 months to go. Gestational period, though, is 40 weeks, not 36. So the actual amount of time is 10 months, technically, 40 weeks. That is just a correct gestational time. So it always kills me when people don't even know how long it takes for a child to be gestated. Anyway, so I mean, I understand, but I'm obviously more of the end of being the product of something of this more than the other way around, because my mother was more of somebody from a more stable 1950s style, 40s style household where, my grandmother and grandfather remained married up until my grandfather, passed away. But yeah, but then obviously a lot of parents were getting married young because obviously there was still the, if anything happened, people got married, So, I mean, his mother was having him do the honorable thing. So at least for Tim, he did the honorable thing. Young, yes. Life-changing, absolutely. I don't think he was old enough to really understand the implications of that. I think since I was somebody who did have a mother who was very young when she had me, I kind of saw the things that I didn't want to replicate in my life, and to the point where I never had children. So I took it to the other extreme. So yeah, interesting. It's interesting. And like we said, we don't know how much of this Tim is actually embellishing. And there's obviously always there's going to be a grain of truth to this. But obviously there's going to be a certain amount of romanticization of it and embellishment. And I mean, in some ways, if it's a little bit more romanticized, and that's better for his daughter or son or whichever the child it was. I'm not sure. So
things didn't work out. I was maturing and growing up, and I started asking myself, what the hell am I doing? And so, within a year or two after my child was born, we separated. And I'll end the story with that because it goes on. There was a reuniting, not of me and her, but of course with my child and all that.
It's a 40-week gestational period. So whatever it is, it's 40 weeks though.
But it was a very young age to father with a woman and all of these things. But this is how fast I grew up. And remember, this woman that I married had 2 kids already. In fact, her eldest and I were closer in age than she and I were. Of course, she was just a child, but literally we were only 8 years apart, and my wife and I were 10 years apart. I know, crazy. So I started working, supporting her and the 2 kids, and then ours that came, and it got to be like way overwhelming, way more on my plate than I can handle. So I, left that deal, and she met somebody else, and life went on with her, and life went on with me to other amazing stories that, it's really, I could write a book. It's just, I don't know too many people, but I've literally been working since I was a young boy.
We all have, Tim. I mean, even when despite having been at school, I still always had to have a job, even at college. And every summer I worked in a factory or somewhere. So I have had work and jobs and school my entire life, Tim. So, and I think, and then I don't know. And obviously the young woman who was 26, probably not the wisest, making the wisest decisions out there, obviously. I'm sure Tim was telling her all sorts of stuff because he was a young man and lost. So he's probably promising all sorts of things to her, I'm sure. But, sadly, there was a child whose parents didn't stay together, and it is hard on children. Having been a child of divorce, I understand that. So yeah, I mean, it's and so, but I guess he kind of feels that, I don't know, the way he tries to say it here about the respect that She went on and remarried, so that kind of absolved him from any like responsibility for the failures of obviously having made a child with this lady and had a marriage. And he seemed like he was unimpressed, as probably most young men at that age would be, of having to be a provider for a woman and children, and two of which were not his own. And I'm sure, and we know how, generous Tim is, that I'm sure he just loved sharing his hundos with some kids that were not his, because you could just imagine. Oh, it's just, yeah. I don't know if that's worthy of a book, Tim. Maybe more of a cautionary tale.
Supporting women and raising children early on in my life. Not
supporting women, Tim. No. When you're impregnating women and then leaving them soon after, is not supporting women. Okay, that's not supporting women. And I understand you might have been behind on some child support in California. One of these states, somebody says he didn't get his child support altogether. That's why he doesn't get a passport, because he's failed his child support, which shocking.
But I started out, I did the latter part of life first, and so, it is what it is. But yeah, I got married at 16, 17 years old, something like that, had child, and left school.
I don't know. I think it depends on whether you have dependents or not, the amount of time it takes to divorce. From what I understood from my friends who divorced, because I only ever divorced in Mexico, and that just took a multa to a propina to the judge. It can be done quickly. I think you have to be like separated in two different addresses for like an entire year before the divorce proceedings can start. And then I don't know how long it can take from there. I guess however long you want to hash it out with the lawyers. But I think in order to start the process, you have to have been separated and living in separate addresses for a year. That's what I think from all my friends who got divorced. But don't quote me.
Before sophomore year ended, never returned to school. Not just didn't finish like a senior year, but I didn't even go to junior or senior. Well, if you want to count it, I did 11 years because I got held back in the first grade, remember, because I didn't know my colors. I just make that up. But the street smarts, the common sense, the way I was taken under a lot of people's wings, the people that I esteem, and God has always been in my life.
Oh, God. God is right here with us right now in the form of Jesus Christ, sitting right here in this stream, Tim. And we don't know about that. You were selling like overpriced Bibles door to door and like taking advantage of some really vulnerable young military men. And I don't know, maybe I know it had it definitely had an impact on him. Whether or not this should have been a video he should have put out like this, I don't know. It's going to be one that the generations now are going to be finding it very difficult to understand that not that long ago, 50 years ago, a 16-year-old boy could marry a 26-year-old woman with 2 kids. That to somebody of this generation is considered to be, she would be considered an adult who was a word that I can't say because YouTube gets funky about language. So it's not the sort of story that Tim thinks it is. In reality, for a different generation, it's showing that he was, other things that are not good. So it's difficult to, and obviously we're older. We come from a different generation, and we've known people. I went to school with a girl. She and I were friends at like 11, and she married the gym teacher when she was 16 years old. She'd been having a relationship with our PE teacher when she was like at school at 16. And So I'm just saying, I'm not saying that these are, things that are good, because I don't think it is. I don't think that 16-year-olds have the mental capability of making those types of adult decisions. And I think it's demonstrated with the reactions that Tim had by pretty much abandoning his family, because he's not going to be able at that young of an age to take on that level of responsibility that most 16-year-olds wouldn't. Not, probably at any time. Your brain just isn't at that place. You're just not there. And it's just, and I think it just, because he felt probably so, and this is just my speculations, obviously. Tim probably needed to get some deep therapy a long time ago. And I'm not treating or diagnosing, obviously, but he obviously, has been unable to kind of shake that feeling of having a immense amount of responsibility at a very early age, and has kind of used that in order to kind of put himself first above everybody else. I think maybe there was a brief moment right then that Tim was being asked to not put himself first, to put the needs of others, the wife, the child, the other children, people that were also, vulnerable individuals. Tim himself was a very young, vulnerable individual. And obviously taking a lot of responsibility. And I think in reality, what that has meant is that he doesn't want to take a heck of a lot of responsibility, which is probably why, again, speculation, he didn't want to go into more formal employment or have anybody directing him or feel that he wanted to be stuck in these prison jobs. I think anything that was going to give Tim any sort of need for actual long-term commitment without it being just for his pleasure was going to have Tim run the other direction.
Since I was real young, I've had a very close relationship as a child. I didn't go through this. I didn't know God until I was 20s. Most people when they're young, they sow in their oats and they're kids. They don't like school. They don't know God. They don't want to hear about church. A lot do, but most don't. And, they don't have the maturity level yet. And they find Christ and God later. Not me. I think I got baptized at 5, 6 years old. I used to pray to get out of whoopings, and I never got them. And I knew there was a God. So between ambition, spirituality, God having a plan in my life, and whatever, just letting me do all of that has made me who I am now. And that's why this last thing in my life and all the things.
Yeah, no, not sure God had much to do with that. I don't think God would be wanting you to not take care of your children, Tim. So, but, so I think that's, I think you took what you had in life and you made what you wanted from it, I think a lot of it was about you just having a good time, Tim. And I think for the longest, it's why you didn't want the responsibility of even taking on a home. It's a lot of responsibility to care for a home. You have to make sure you get the payments, the insurance. I mean, persistently. A car, I think Tim thinks is something he can just easily trade in. Get another one. It's just a little bit more difficult with a house. It's easier when you can just skip town on rent on a room or an apartment. I think after the experience of marrying at such an early age, and yet he managed to go through it another 2 times, which is kind of indicative of these types of patterns of behaviors with these types of folks. And I certainly would not want any female to hitch herself up to this guy. I know I was joking, like, he's single, ladies, come and get him. He's lonely. He wants a lady to take care of him. And I'm thinking to myself, well, Tim, the men that have these wives who are more traditional wives, who are like Raffaella and, Miss Jolene or whatever with Teddy and cooking for him, because these men have been partners to these ladies for decades and have provided for them. And so these, ladies, grew up more traditionally and caring for their men in that way and cooking or whatever. Would I do that for a guy? Heck no. we'd be ordering something because I work as much. So no, I'm not using my spare time to be your cook and your slave. Would not be happening. Have to be all equal, and we're ordering. So I mean, Tim, to expect to find some lady now who's gonna want to hitch herself up to him, he's gonna have to hope she's real lonely because you got nothing. You're providing nothing, Tim. Well, I mean, seriously. Yeah, I mean, is it your dazzling company? Because that you'd be irritating as heck within like a day. So I mean, I just I'm just wonder if there is going to be any female that we actually see come along into. Is there going to be some pick me woman out there who's desperate and doesn't want to be single that bad and has to have a man? Because there's always someone out there who's got to have a partner, male or female. Just can't be alone. Tim's one of these can't be alone people. That's why he's married 3 times. That's why he stuck Tammy around forever until she probably bailed on him. I think the only reason Tammy not around is because Tammy bailed on Tim.
In between that you don't know about, other stories that I have, were there for a season, but they were never meant to be like forever. And I would say that most people that are married now or either were married before to somebody else, very few people are, unless you're older, or been married for 40, 50, 60 years. Most people either just got married or they're getting ready to get a divorce or they've been divorced, some a couple of times. So it's not unusual in that respect, but it's very unusual to get married at my age and not even finishing high school. And to be really working, getting a job and wanting to do it, wanting to be money in my pocket, putting that above any kind of, I want to go to college and sow my oats and be a frat boy. No, I mean, forget that.
No, it just sounded like you got to sow your oats at your mom's apartment building. I mean, and you were talking about canoodling with the girls over at Lover's Lane, Tim. So I don't think you needed college to do any of that. That's just no, Tim. And I promise you, we went to college because we also wanted to have money in our pockets. And a lot of us worked. I worked most of the time I was through college. So, I mean, obviously it's different if you're in a full-time job. I have friends who went on to professions. I mean, didn't go to college. I mean, all sorts. So, but he is always going to downplay anybody who went to college because he didn't go to college. I won't downplay somebody just because they didn't go to college. I know there's lots of people who are very smart who never finished college and never went to college. Tim is not one of them, though. In my opinion.
So, anyway, what do you guys think about that? I don't have any regrets. It was hot. It was good. She was amazing, and I got an amazing child from it.
Oh, okay.
And the experience of driving across country with Kenny, scared to death and excited at the same time. Washing those pots and pans, thinking about the trip and saving every quarter and dime and nickel and penny and putting in the bank every day. When I was in school, meeting the guys, surfing at the beach,
are you
and fishing
out
on
for
the
the
pier,
night, Tammy?
homecoming dances and meeting girls and, losing your virginity and all the things that go along with some of that part of your life early on for some people. All very exciting. I mean, they're some of the best memories. I mean, I watched them build I-95 over there on the East Coast. It was a much, much cooler place, West Palm Beach, than it is today. I mean, it was.
You obviously haven't heard his Bible sales story to the military guys, the $2,000 Bibles. I don't think that. I mean, the one thing is that I'm glad he feels no shame. He shouldn't feel ashamed of his children at all. Obviously, they are wonderful children, wonderful gifts. Like I said, I'm a pediatric nurse. I love kids, but. This I have a lot of feelings about this. And then the other stories. But I feel that Tim will always have a way of being able to, I mean, in some ways, I'm glad he doesn't regret the things. I don't know. I think you should regret getting Kenny in trouble, though, Tim. I think that was, and then the fact that not shortly after that, running away incident, most 16-year-old boys, Tim, are not trying to have relationships with 26-year-old women with children. I'm just saying, I've been a teacher, and I've seen 16-year-old boys and stuff. And so there was something definitely, I think, from a psychiatric, psychological point of view, that Tim was definitely was acting out in a lot of ways. Knowing that obviously all the situation, and then he obviously understood the birds and the bees. If he was that supposedly street smart, he obviously didn't care to not take caution. If you're going to be doing that sort of stuff, smart thing to do for multiple reasons. See, I grew up in the generation when, HIV AIDS was coming about. So fortunately, it made everybody absolutely petrified of everybody.
It was really amazing to go from California, which was already cool,
But yeah,
because of my mom's
it's
situation
not
and
considered.
the financial situation that she had, and the opportunities that were going to afford me weren't much. And then I came to live with my father, and he provided, a room for me in the garage. We built a garage with the beads and the black light, and I had the friends, and he got me the car and all that. I can hear some of the less than courteous people out there now that might want to use that against me, that, well, he did all that for you and then you ran away. Well, he left my mother when I was, 2 or 3. They split up. So he went his own way. He was a young man too. He was very young.
Well, Tim, just because your father didn't treat your mother correctly doesn't mean that you then should have treated other people incorrectly. You would hope that you would learn from such a situation, but obviously apple didn't fall far from the tree. I feel that Tim is doing a lot of justifying. Yeah, deep therapy probably would have been beneficial, Tim. I promise you, therapy is beneficial.
Not as young as me, but not much older, and so he did that, and I kind of followed his footsteps. And believe it or not, of all the kids, my father, who's gone to be with the Lord, had, him and I are alike in every way, even our looks. But our ambitions.
Oh my gosh, that's what that noise was that's been irritating me the whole night. It's been Tim's AC going on in the background. I've been like, what is that? Just running noise. And it's literally Tim's AC. Oh my goodness. Alpha grandpa out here just coming out with the wildest stuff. And he is an alpha grandpa because he's just like on a roll. He has like supped up so much of this like red pill alpha male manosphere podcast bro life. He's wild. And this, how I got married at 62, I was 26 years old. I mean, it's a pretty click. I'm surprised he hasn't gotten more views on this one. But like I said, it's probably some of the younger people probably find it a little bit creepy. This is not something that would resonate with young people. They would find this to be a really like bad story. They don't understand this stuff. They really don't.
The way we feel about life, our curiosities, our willing to try everything, especially our ambitions and things, are just so close. And his name was Freddie. And when I used to go to visit my grandmother, his mom, on a farm in Alabama, and of course she's gone on to be with the Lord. She loved me to death. I would meet cousins every time I would go visit her that I never knew I had, second, third cousins and all this. And their parents, my second and third aunts or great aunts or whatever they were, I get lost in all these
It's amazing that he preaches about the Bible, considering that he sold extortionately priced Bibles to young military men in San Diego and literally entered their home for 45 minutes and probably like badgered them to buy these things. No Christian, good Christian goes door to door selling Bibles paper moon style.
Relations that were hashed up. But they would say Freddie Baker, when they would look at me, if they just met me for the first time or hadn't seen me in a long time, that at my age, when they knew my father when he was a young boy, that's how, and you've seen people how they look like their father and girls look like their mother and just a spitting image. And my father's other kids, I think they favor the mother more. But both my brother, the troublemaker, and myself look alike.
I don't know if the Baker is a stepfather adopted last name or his dad's. I'm thinking it is his dad's name because I think he's always been Timothy Ray Baker.
And favor my father the most, I think. But so I look back at it and hearing myself tell the story. It's kind of weird. I think I should post this.
Oh.
Hey, it's out there now, and it's not such a terrible thing. But that's how I grew up. That's how I look.
Well, thank you, Junebug. Well, Anne, I'm so sorry that you had to experience those things, but I'm glad that you were able to break the chain. So I think a lot of us have a lot of that happened. I think that's kind of, Tim is kind of whitewashing, what is actually something that was pretty traumatic in his life, and I think impacted him and his ability to make good and wise decisions more than he's really letting on. When you go ahead and marry a couple of more times and still have children at a very young age, I think that, and then you're not providing stability for them or their mothers or even for yourself in a lot of ways. I think that you then are, obviously not learning from the situation. I think Tim was doing a lot of running in his life. That's probably why he was, going on these cross-country journeys on his motorbikes and just, wanting to escape responsibility. I'm sure that Tim is somebody, and I think he really does. I think he, like I said, he felt so much responsibility at one given time that the rest of his life has been about escaping responsibility, But now he has the consequences of that as an older man, because that responsibility, that escaping of it, has meant that he doesn't have a great deal of assets. And what he does have, he's managed to get through the American taxpayer.
Learned the ways of the world and how to be responsible and make money. And I didn't need to I even have a trade if I wanted to set tile. I mean, I know all about tile. I've probably forgotten more than I ever learned, but at the time, I could definitely be a helper. They don't do it the same way anymore. But other than that, I have no other, trades or knowledge. And I certainly don't have.
I don't know, Catherine. That's a good question. It might be state dependent. I don't know if it's I don't know. I think you can hit a child. I think you will see parents smack kids in stores here. I have spoken out. I have spoken up for a kid when a parent has done that here. I have told them, please do not do that. But so I have spoken up for on behalf of children, because I have seen kids get smacked on the bottom and stuff, and it's really not good. It's unnecessary. That shows a lack of control from the parent, not the lack of control of the child. I think once you realize that you're an adult, I think you understand that you have a better control of the situation than the child, and it's how you handle it. Now, obviously, there are children. I've seen a lot of children who are on the spectrum, children who have, autism and so forth. And you could see where that can be draining for a parent, absolutely draining. So, it really is going to be somewhat child dependent too, but obviously you would never hit that child, but it certainly is going to, test your last nerves.
Have a degree behind my name on anything, but I've got a whole lot of common sense and a lot of people skills.
Well, people manipulation skills you have plenty of, Tim. Common sense, no. We just saw the fiasco with the Honda, okay, and the fact that you're living full time in a recreational camper that in a couple of years' time, sir, is not going to be in great condition, and it will not be livable. So you're going to have to figure out older how you're going to get yourself probably with a dried up YouTube channel because your channel lame. Absolutely content terrible.
Communication skills and working with people. So yeah, no, I got no regrets. I like my life pretty good. But what I was going to say a minute ago is after that situation and in other relationships that I had along the way up to my 66 years, I do believe that while they were all sad and painful when when one ended, if you've ever had your heart broken before, you've been through a divorce or even a boyfriend girlfriend situation, it's kind of the same, just different people. But you give your heart into it and then it ends and you're like, well, what happened? And you're used to somebody, and so that's happened to me, and that's kind of why I kind of tapped the brakes and went many, many years as a single person. I kind of really never wanted to experience that again. Of all the things in life to deal with, that to me, that's one of the toughest things. I can deal with a lot, but those are always very similar and very, I don't like it. I don't like it at all. So here we are again.
Telling you, ladies, Tim's looking. Doesn't like to be single. Tim needs to have that attention. He needs the attention. Who wants to give Tim attention? He's ready and willing. He's all tanned and, working out for you. Remember, he wants an athletic lady.
And moving towards the next chapter in life. It seems to be the book is opening and the pages are turning and things will be coming.
Oh, I know.
Things will be happening with this channel, I hope and pray. And things will be happening in my personal life one day. It's nothing I'm pushing. I've never done that. I don't want to do that. I don't even solicit it. I've never solicited it. It's always just kind of happened. And they come in very long in between intervals. I can't sit here and say I've had so many relationships, because I haven't. I really haven't. I'm quite competent and comfortable.
That's because you and Tammy had that affair going on for so long. That's why Tim got all tangled up with Tammy. Because you and Tammy are known associates from the early 2000s, Tim. Like 2004, 2005. So you've had Tammy a good 20 years in your life. Find it weird, though, that he met her through one of his wives because they were working together at the same place. That's just weird to me. I don't think I know any guy who was married to any person that I knew like that. I mean, I know it happens, but whoa. All right, Tim, you're almost done. Let's finish you out. Let's get this done.
By myself. And I'm also very comfortable and understand like old school way of being like the man in a relationship. And I'm very comfortable doing that.
Huh?
In fact, at this point in my life, I kind of would prefer that with the right one. It's just
here he goes. I'm telling you, he's throwing out these messages all the time that Tammy must be gone. Tim's on the hunt, or he's sending out the smoke signals to Tammy. One of the two. That he is just wanting to be in this relationship, and he's the man, and he's going to provide. What are you providing, Tim? What are you providing? Any woman going near you would have to come with a lock solid prenup or anything, just like making sure that their wallet was under wraps. I mean, Tammy was even paying for all those hotels. Can you imagine Tim the man? This guy, can you imagine? Tim has no idea. When he cheapskate, that's it. They'd be out like a flash. The only reason why probably Tammy dealt with it was because she was married and you were okay with having an affair with a married woman. because she was still legally married to Dwayne right up until the time he passed him.
But it's got to happen. It's just got to happen. I'm not going to go out and solicit it, sign up for it, run an ad for it. No, I don't believe that works. I think that it just has to happen. You can be looking at bananas in Publix tomorrow, and maybe that's where it is. I don't know. But until
Tim, you have a YouTube channel, and we're gonna finish him up here because he's about to say he's gonna crush it, I'm sure. Tim, you have a YouTube channel that recently, and I almost did a video about it called "He's Lonely." Because he keeps talking about wanting to have a partner. All right, we finished Tim here. You're gonna bring me up big and take Tim small. Oh my God! Oh, thank you. I know he's like, oh my gosh, Ray. Ray is the he is the total package. Oh yeah. He absolutely just the total package. Like my hair is the total package at the moment. He is absolutely just like, oh my goodness, guys. I mean, I you have to say, this chap here is just he is lonely. Tim is feeling lonely, and he is always now, if you watch his videos, kind of asking to find some lady. This is why he is working so hard to look so good. Is because I think he is trying to get a partner because he wants, some poor woman to be washing his smalls and cooking his burgers, I guess. And, having to listen to his incessant talk about where the cheapest cup of coffee is. Can you imagine? Couldn't imagine a worse night of torture than having to have a night out with cheapskate Tim. That would be my idea of an absolute nightmare. It's like that's my first sign of like run from the date would be just like if they're just being that cheap, I mean, it's not like you want to have people spend stupid money, but you just want to think that people are secure enough financially that they're not like penny pinching and counting every penny on a date. Oh my goodness. I would not set them up with Foodie. Oh my God. I don't think they could grift each other. They would be trying to figure out who could grift the other person the most. I don't think he's a Foodie. I don't think Foodie's his type. She does do the paint. But I think he likes somebody a little more svelte than Foodie. Well, I do appreciate all of the moderators who came in this evening. We had Miss Catherine came in. We had Miss Sammy was here. Obviously, we had Angel of Glass. So I really do appreciate that. You're switching to tea. Well, I enjoy a cup of tea. I can promise you that much, though I do like a coffee. Tammy's been away for a while now. Yeah, she's been away for quite a while during this breakup. She must really be embarrassed about throwing the cup of coffee in the face comment. I don't know if they see. I don't know what happened. Like I think the straw that broke the camel's back, because didn't they still after that go to that hotel out in? Didn't they go on a vacation after that? I want to say, or was that before? I want to say even after that incident. He and she went to that hotel out somewhere in Florida. I want to feel like that was a makeup like trip after that incident, and that they were trying to make it up. And I guess Tammy was probably putting the kibosh on Tim being able just to run around and film all the time and catch her, because we were catching her and his sunglasses and, just like trolling the crud out of the two of them, really. Obviously, we had people catching them out in Sarasota. Sharon caught them and got photos. We had another guy got us some photos. And we're catching them all out at Nathan Benderson Park. And I'm sure she was just feeling like it was getting intrusive. And I also do think that her family probably sold or were selling the home or were moving away and leaving Florida. Maybe her daughter and her son-in-law or somehow were moving away. or I think they're up in North Carolina, I believe Jay said. And so I think that Tammy is probably feeling that she'd rather be wherever her family is than deal with Tim. Because Tim is not going to stop filming. So if she ever said, well, you can't film here, because obviously he couldn't film at the apartment except the one time he was sick. And then everybody recognized the apartment, and she probably put a kibosh on that. So I think, Tim's desire to have this, viral YouTube hit again, because I've heard some interesting things, and I'm sure this could happen. Once you've had a video that went as viral as Tim's did, because that was a pretty big video, despite it being a terrible video, and obviously the money that he still gains from that video, he's going to be wanting to continuously chase that high, for want of a better word. And so he's not going to stop. And so even if it's to like his daughter, whose husband is a school teacher, saying, no, you can't come over here and film, we don't want you around. Or if it's Tammy saying, no, you can't film here. Even Fred and Rafaela have seemed to kind of put kiboshes on him filming at their home anymore, because we don't really see that too often. I think it's just that he needs to make this money. I think it's an ego filler, and two, he literally needs to make the money. Cost of living is very high in the US, and obviously Tim is on a fixed income. He has Social Security and nothing else. And he's hopefully he'll do something smart with the money he sold with the Honda. We know he's not going to pay back any of his EIDL loans, because he's hoping he's going to, go, feet up before he ever pays that back. All right, guys, I certainly did have fun with you this evening. I'm sorry if I seem a little tired. I've had a very strange work week. Like, I've worked today, been off a day, worked today, been off a day, because I was helping a colleague with her wanting to take today off. So I worked today. I don't usually work Fridays, and I had this huge paper to write. And so anyway, I'm so glad you did join me, though. I'm going to ask you guys, just if you haven't had a chance to hit the likes, make sure you do so before we leave. Hopefully, it won't be too long before we catch up the next time. If you haven't caught Tim's weird salesperson video, check it out.